Hi there, my name is Philip Eidson. I want to welcome you to the Art of Procurement podcast, the podcast that helps you, a forward-thinking procurement professional, position yourself and your team to proactively take advantage of the revolution that's taking place in procurement today. By interviewing industry trailblazers and sharing insights from our own experiences, my team and I pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics, and tools that procurement teams are using to elevate their impact.
Hi there, I'm Helen Mackenzie, Head of Community and Events at Art of Procurement. Procurement's such a wonderful space to work in, isn't it? We've got the opportunity to leverage the potential of new technology, the data to help us provide insight and drive decision making, and the relationships with stakeholders and suppliers that bring us back to the people who are involved. Over the holiday period, the team at Art of Procurement is putting together some different podcast episodes for you, a compilation of our highlights from the podcast or events. For my selection, I've chosen extracts from some of the sessions I've had the pleasure of hosting at our live events in 2022. They're a powerful illustration of the space that is procurement. First up, it's an extract from a session at Digital Outcomes with Melissa Drew, Associate Partner at IBM. Melissa's theme was how AI can elevate procurement's focus from the tactical to the strategic. My second selection is also from Digital Outcomes. It's SpendHQ's Chief Operating Officer, Doug van Wingerden, whose session helped us understand how technology works and how it's changing the game of category management. And finally, from our Summer Festival of Category Management, Category Palooza, I've chosen Tanya Manning-Grant, the CEO of TMG Professional Services Consulting Firm, whose session focused on driving supply chain value in disrupted times. If these extracts whet your appetite to hear more and you want to view the full sessions, check out the link in the show notes. Procurement's been on a journey to harness the power of technology for many decades now. Lots of ideas have been around for a while, solutions have come and gone, and Melissa Drew has seen most of them in her work at IBM. In the excerpt from her session at Digital Outcomes that I've chosen for you today, Melissa will first describe where we've reached technology-wise, and then give us a feel for where artificial intelligence can and is taking us forward.
The procurement organization is really primed right now to move to the next evolution. If we kind of step back and look at maybe something that was really thought to move procurement forward, but it stalled, it was around the 2015 timeframe. So we had, the CPO Rising study that was out there, and finally it was communicated to the industry that we are moving from a strategic organization into an agile organization. And for those of you who haven't been here 3 decades, we had been stuck in that strategic organization from the 1990s all the way to 2015. So, we were ready to change. We were ready to move forward. And the expectations is that we were going to, improve collaboration with our lines of business, bring out stronger policies and processes, improve the use of technology. And the term agile was coined to define that organization's ability to adjust quickly to the changes of our consumers, not only internally, but to our brand's customers. And then it just kind of fell short. We thought we were going to be utilizing automation within this agile framework, but 6 years later, and this is kind of carrying on to Kelly's conversation just a moment ago, is we still lack confidence in procurement data. We still lack visibility into supplier risks. We have inaccuracy in our limitations of data, and we can't make timely and actionable decisions because we're not utilizing the data in the right way. And even now, when automation was supposed to be the wave of the future 6 years ago, we're still recognizing that we haven't really automated. And it's only now, Helen, now with technology, it's like everything that we've wanted to do in the past 6 years, we now have the automation and the cognitive technologies or the AI technologies that can really take everything that we've wanted to do and really execute it.
So in a sense, what you're saying is, perhaps we were ahead of ourselves in terms of where we were thinking we could go, and actually technology or the digital side as in a sense caught up a little bit now. Then is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. If I reach out to anybody, at the moment, and I can name off, a couple, even though they've gone through these digital transformations, as a part of bringing about a more agile and automated, procurement organization, they've come back 2 or 3 years later and say, I didn't get the automation that I was looking for. I'm still doing day-to-day tactical activities. My resources in procurement are still literally going and typing and hitting buttons in order to push processes through cloud procurement technology that we thought was going to automate our end-to-end life cycle. So, we still had this gap, even up until, last year. Why aren't we able to capture that automation and really bring procurement into the next wave of where it needs to be within the organization?
Okay, so I think that takes us on quite nicely to the next topic that I wanted to talk about. In terms of AI and all of this side of things, I think it sounds to me as if we're at that point where we're moving from if to now. But I think we often talk about it in the context of it being something that's about to happen or that might only happen in big companies. And I think it would be really, useful for us and for the participants on the session today to bring that to life and give us some examples of actually how that tech is being used right now, so we can see that it's happening.
Yeah, so I do want to just level set that when I use the term AI, I am not referencing a robot that's out there automatically, learning.
Yes.
I just want, it's not a robot that's going to come in and take over your job. Yeah. But what I'm referencing is the technologies that we can utilize to work with our data, work with our processes, automate those processes. So just as we go forward, I'm not talking about robots taking over anyone's job, but it's really taking the tactical out of our day to day, and truly shifting us into those strategic and value-based outcomes, which is what we've always wanted to do. So to answer your question, a lot of folks say, oh, well, here's all the benefits. You can do X, Y, and Z, or here's what you need to do. You need to automate your requisitions. You need to automate your contracts. You need to automate, how you rethink supply chain. But going back to your question, it's, well, that's great, and everybody keeps telling me what I need to do, but how do I physically do it? So let's take an example of something really, just something small. I have a cloud procurement technology in place. It can be any of the providers out there. And if I look at how I can automate my requisitions, it's going back and focusing on how many times does your end user, whether it's your procurement or your stakeholder, how many times do they physically have to touch that requisition? And if I look at it from a risk perspective, let's say office supplies, do I really have to touch a requisition for office supplies? Can I just automate that and says that, hey, if I'm buying office supplies, or if I'm buying it from this office supplies vendor and it's under a certain threshold, then my end user should only have to create that requisition once, and it should be auto approved because it's low risk, it's under a certain threshold. It should be auto flipped into a PO, automatically sent out so I can get my supplies the next day, and then my invoice should be automated. So in reality, something like that, where you talk about automating your requisitions, your end user only touched it once. They created the need and then they stepped away. They never had to worry about it again. And it's those little tiny things that, that's just configuration of the tool. That's not even moving over into the other extreme where we're applying these AI, these cognitive technologies. But that's one example of, even if you don't have AI today, you've got tools out there that you've probably already have purchased or you've been using that have already built in some of those functionalities within them. Maybe you just didn't know it.
Yeah, and are you seeing that people have to test their or challenge their sort of governance procedures as part of that? Because I'm thinking that, some of these things might be about, well, how much tolerance have you got for, where the price is slightly different from the PO in terms of the invoice and moving it through. Are you seeing that people are having to think about that trade-off between, the value of controls, but also the cost of holding something up in the process and the human being actually touching it?
Yeah, that's a really good observation. We're so, I've been in procurement. I've been on the buy side, the sell side, so I've been there. And we're so focused on these procurement policies and these governance, policies and procedures that have existed for the last 15, 20 years. Why do we still have a policy, 3 bids and a buy? Well, that policy was created 20 years because it made sense 20 years ago. It doesn't make sense now. So one of the things that's been a bit of an obstacle is, yeah, we want to move forward, but we're almost tripping in our own feet. We're almost our own obstacles to success, and that we need to push aside what we think we knew about procurement and policies and governance, and we need to, put our different hat on that says, what can we do and how can we do better? And then from there, you will find that the revision of the policies and the procedures come in play.
Mm-hmm.
But to your other point that you just mentioned, it's also around, if I'm sitting in procurement and I now need to evaluate software that's got AI, or if I'm in, the medical field and we now have, software as a medical device, which we're wearing them all over the place, something you apply to your, cancer patients, apply it to their arm, and it automatically keeps track of time and doses and pushes it into their body when they need it. That technology is artificial intelligence that's built in directly to the software of that medical device.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these procurement companies, when we talk about what's the impact of AI to procurement organization, it's also recognizing that your procurement organization would need to get skilled, skilled up to what is AI, what are the right questions I should ask when I'm trying to evaluate a company, or I'm looking to partner with a company that I'm either bringing in services or software into the procurement organization on behalf of the rest of the organization. So it's not just using AI to automate procurement and take the organization to the next level, but is also, what is it that we need to help the procurement team know so that they can evaluate and make better informed decisions themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Sticking with the topic of what procurement needs to know takes me nicely into the next segment I've selected for you. Category management is procurement's bread and butter, but often the focus on sourcing rather than the whole cycle, the urgent, wins out over the important. Data can hold the key to helping procurement bring outcomes to the fore. Here's SpendHQ's Doug Van Wingerden's take on how data can help unlock the potential for procurement to deliver more.
Again, today I'm really excited to be here, and I think the topic of digital outcomes is perfect for this little chat today, because what we're hearing in category management is in reality that the outcome is not being realized, and that's something we've heard kind of it seems like forever in procurement. It's been a common challenge of the CFO always says, why aren't my savings materializing to the bottom line? Well, that friction or pushback is coming from a lot of different parts of the business. It's coming from risk. It's coming from folks that are in charge of diversity goals or sustainability or carbon neutrality. There's a lot of things that we've done, and procurement's done a great job of understanding categories, developing strategies, and running the play and executing the sourcing event. And what they haven't done as good a job is managing the category on the back end, and even realizing that there's many things they still can do after the sourcing event to continue to optimize the category. But to do that, they need to have good data. And the other thing that we hear is that they don't have data that they can trust that often. And then when they get into the category specifically to understand what are those unique manual moves they can make within the category, they don't have that category knowledge. Or quite simply, it's we don't have the depth and the people there to do it. So that's really kind of the business problem that we've been addressing.
Yeah, and I know from first-hand experience that being able to trust your data is a really important part of the process. I once went into a meeting where we were talking about spend on cranes, and when we actually drilled down into the data, the supplier did other things as well, and it wasn't a great time to promote procurement with that data that we couldn't trust. So a really big issue for people. So okay, we've got our problems there, Doug. How does SpendHQ go about solving those challenges then? How does your tech sort of help with that problem?
Yeah, sure. The first thing we'll start with is realization that there's a tremendous burden on category managers today. The expectations are sky high. They really have to do three things well. First, they've got to be an expert in the category, and then they've got to understand the external marketplace. They have to be a data scientist to be able to pull all this together and run the analysis to develop the insights and actions. And they also have to have deep business knowledge of the business and relationships to go out there and drive the influence in the organization for people to adopt the behavioral changes that will really lead to the outcomes. Now, understanding that most procurement organizations don't have the budget and the time to hire an army of category managers, the way we're thinking about it is let's arm category managers that are typically really good procurement athletes. They know the business really well. They know the internal process with a different way to think about category management. And it starts with the category first. And in a specific category, start with a category intelligence and a playbook that understands what are the specific levers that could be there to drive change. You think about like transportation or truckload. Yes, you can go run a great sourcing event and get a good price by lane, but your shipments always move and change over time. Are there opportunities to consolidate? Are there opportunities to switch modes? I've run a good event. I've got to make sure that I've got a good price in those lanes that I've awarded, but I need to watch to make sure that the top three suppliers that I want to be picking up my freight and not ultimately picking up a better price are actually tendering the loads. And then, of course, I want to monitor, pricing compliance and accessorial fees and things like that. So if you start with, this is what I need to know, the second part is, okay, let's go get the right data to put together the analysis and insights to monitor and keep up with the levers. So it's usage data. It could be combined with what are our internal baselines and our contracts and our budgets. And it could be infused with third-party data that are indices on metals or other things along the way. And then we take those two things and put them together and serve them back up to category managers in an execution-oriented category dashboard. And just give you a peek of what that would look like. Really, world-class category management does three things. It basically tracks the savings or tracks the outcome. And this is savings detail that a CFO would believe. Am I getting the savings because I've actually gotten a better deal and the vendor's performing, or am I getting the savings because I spend less in general, or I'm buying less? Well, we're able to isolate all those things down and actually prove that these are true procurement influence and driven savings versus the overall patterns. The next thing is playing defense on deal erosion. We all know that deals tend to erode over time. And where does leakage comes from? Pricing accuracy is one of them. And when you have high SKU or high volume categories, just a small little inaccuracy in price, which is pretty common because billing systems and provisioning systems don't necessarily talk to each other. They happen. And so who's looking at the data to make sure that that's there? And then there's the holy grail of category management, which is the optimization levers. Am I really getting what I expect and driving those along the way? And really the bottom line to all this is what we're doing here is we're taking the heavy lifting and the burden off the category managers to do all that data work and arming them with the tools to do what they do best, and that's to manage the category and influence the business.
Using data and technology to take the strain to arm us with the tools we need to manage our category and influence the business leads me nicely into the final excerpt I've chosen for you. Tanya Manning-Grant leads a procurement consulting firm and joined me for a session at Category Palooza to discuss supply chain disruption. In this section, Tanya explores the people side of things, from procurement talent to making use of a diverse supply base and how we might capture the value from working with them.
Right now, we are experiencing what is called the Great Resignation. We have a lot of people with years of experience, Helen, with years of relational indicators with a lot of these suppliers leaving companies, shifting companies, or going out on their own. I'm seeing more and more, small firms like mine growing and expanding. Mm-hmm. And so how do we retain that talent? What are we doing to retain that intellectual capital that leaves when individuals leave. So what are we doing? So what I'm advising a lot of companies to do right now is revisiting strategies around retaining people, retaining that knowledge, and then also how do we advance that knowledge? A lot of companies that are investing in artificial intelligence, data analytics, are also able to weather this storm. So it's taking what is in here and getting it down into a repository, whatever that looks like for you, and helping to utilize that level of information to help make decisions moving forward. That becomes part of this recovery plan. So I think we really need to focus in on that. Yeah. What I also think is very critical during this time is being able to segment your suppliers effectively. I think a lot of times companies don't really invest in that, but really understanding supplier segmentation. And that's based upon how much you're spending with this supplier, how much it's costing you to spend with these suppliers, where does these supplier partners fit within their own ecosystem, within their own industry, getting references on a lot of these suppliers. Because when you work with a lot of suppliers, you hear a lot of those, I like to call good feel stories or win-wins. What I like to hear when I am investing in a new supplier or vetting a new supplier is, give me scenarios where you have fallen down and how did you pick yourself back up? Give me scenarios where you may have lost a bid. Why did you lose the bid? Did you understand why you lost the bid? And how did you recover from that? What strategies did you employ to make sure that the next time that you have an opportunity, that it becomes a win-win for you? How did you help, someone like me, a company like mine, overcome, a situation? What was that level of investment for you? What was that level of investment back to the company? And what does that ROI look like? So being able to segment your suppliers along those lines, I think is very critical as well. And so I would wrap it up to say too, I want to touch on going back for a second to what I like to call GPOs, those group purchasing opportunities. There's so many of them out there, but so many companies are not necessarily aware of them, or I think a lot of times they shy away from them. And so I will implore companies, particularly small to medium-sized firms, to invest in that knowledge, to understand those buying groups. And there are several of them out there, and they bring a lot of positive impacts to you. It can help you drive down rate card increases or price increases. It gives you working knowledge that you may not necessarily have in terms of what's happening in the marketplace, what's happening with CPIs, what other firms are doing to help drive costs down. So I think it's very, very important to invest in the knowledge, the working knowledge, and the understanding of a GPO.
Excellent. Oh, well, what a wealth of knowledge you've given us there, Tanya, for all those different tactics. We've got some questions in the chat, and I'm keen to bring those in. So you've talked a little bit about thinking about the capabilities of suppliers, and for me that made me think it's perhaps not all about cost then. Yes. And we've had some questions in about measuring how you'd actually measure the value that supplier would bring if we're not basing it on savings. So here's one I'm going to put up for you now. So how can we capture the measure the innovative ROI of working with a small diverse boutique supplier? Because you've certainly outlined all the benefits there, but how can we actually measure that and demonstrate the value they're bringing?
I think that's an excellent question. And I think the best way to measure that is delegating a very small, maybe less strategic opportunity towards those suppliers, to give them an opportunity to prove out their innovativeness, to prove out their technology, to prove out their understanding of what the ask here is pilot programs. I think pilot programs are wonderful for small, diverse, boutique type opportunities or firms. So if a supplier comes to you and you have an opportunity that maybe not be as impactful to the overall operations, but yet still needs to be executed on, I've seen this happen. I've actually done this myself and had these suppliers perform extremely well, or uncovered some things that they did not necessarily perform well, and have actually challenged me to go back and look at how I am executing on RFPs, on SOWs, that sort of thing. So when you say how can we capture or measure the innovativeness, it is taking that risk that I talked about earlier, being able to pivot some of that business over to these suppliers. But I also want to put a caveat in there too, is to make sure that you establish and you set up a equitable playing field. I have seen situations where when we have invested in these opportunities and brought diverse suppliers on, we have a tendency to hold them at a higher level than we would some of our other suppliers. So we just want to make sure that we make it an equitable playing field, and we establish what those measurements are up front, what those KPIs are up front, and what an expected ROI back is from doing so, to make sure that everybody is completely knowledgeable about those expectations.
Okay, that's great. That was a good outline of what we can do there. I think there's quite a lot of what you were talking about there was about change, about doing things slightly differently.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another great question here about energy. A lot of people are feeling a bit ground down by all the things they've had to do. How can we find the energy to drive that change? And I think it links into the final topic that you were going to cover. We've not got a lot of time now, only got a few minutes, but
Sure.
How can we find that energy to help us do this change that you've said there's lots of ways we can do that?
This is an excellent question. And I think a lot of us are actually feeling very fatigued. I call it the economic fatigue. We're all going through this. And I will tell you what I've seen, and what has worked for me is small wins. Is taking a step back and looking at, taking it. So instead of looking at it, eating the elephant in one bite, it's breaking it down and establishing what can you accomplish short term, what can you accomplish long term, and believing in that those short term wins, and sort of like banking on that, if you will, helps to overcome some of the fatigue that we have. I think a lot of it also starts with the top of the house, and being able to say, as partners, we're going to weather the storm. We're going to get through this. But this is how we need to do it. So it has to be a team effort. It has to be all hands on deck. Everyone needs to be moving in the same direction. And I think also what helps is, because what you're really talking about here is change management. It's changing mindsets and change management. And I think what helps with that is taking the risk, working to help take the risk or remove the risk of change, finding common grounds in the benefit of such, establishing a roadmap, being structured and effective in establishing a roadmap, and start out with small wins. Small wins lead to gaining people's trust, becoming that trusted advisor, and being willing to listen.
That's brilliant, and that really is nearly the final word. And I was going to ask you if there was one thing people can do as a takeaway from the session, other than the small wins. Is there anything else you just want to pop into there with all the nuggets of wisdom that you've shared as your final thing about taking action?
I would say, guys, we're going to weather this storm. We're going to get through it. Let's just, find common ground. Let's change our vernacular. Let's start looking at our suppliers as partners, and our partners looking at us beyond being a customer, but working together. Reciprocity is going to be key. And then the 3 words that I started off with is responsibility, being able to be resilient and pivot. Having that mindset of change will get us through this.
A mindset of change. What a great place to end this week's podcast. 3 clips that powerfully illustrate the space that is procurement from the Art of Procurement's thematic events held in 2022. All the sessions are available to watch again on the Art of Procurement website. Check out the link in the show notes to find out more. And I hope to see you at the 2023 thematic events.
If this episode struck a chord with you, please do send it to somebody. We grow here at Art of Procurement through word of mouth, and that would be really appreciated. You can also support us by giving us a thumbs up, a star rating, or a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Since 2015, we've built the world's largest free resource for procurement professionals looking to elevate their impact. Our resources span podcasts like this, videos, blog posts, papers, and events. To join us on the inside and to ensure you never miss an episode, a webinar, event, or a post, please do subscribe to our weekly newsletter, This Week in Procurement. You can do that at artofprocurement.com/subscribe. That's artofprocurement.com/subscribe. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.